What's up, everybody? I'm Drew with Universal Audio, and welcome back to UAD Spotlight. So, I've made a bunch of these videos so far, and I end each one asking you what you want me to cover in a future video. Well, today is that future, and in this video, I'm going to cover the highly requested topic of drum mixing. So let's jump right in, and let me start by playing you the finished drum sound, both in context with other instruments and soloed up. Let's check it out. All right, so let me get started by telling you a little bit about this session. These are drums I've recorded here recently at the studio, and I used mostly UA standard series mics. In fact, all of the close mics are standard series mics. And then the overheads are my Schoeps MK4s, and the room mics are some Crown PZMs that are in my acoustic reverb chamber. So let's dig in and start by taking a look at the kick drum. Let me solo it up here for you and bring up its processing. So this is an inside kick mic, which is the SD5, and the outside kick mic is actually a Solomon sub kick mic. And on the left-hand side, you're gonna see the kick in mic. And if you'll notice, there's no EQ. So it's just the raw sound of the microphone. It sounds that good. I don't need to do anything to it. All of the action is happening over here on the left-hand side. And as you'll see in the dynamics area, I am doing slow attack, fast release compression, roughly 5-to-1. And then I'm using the expander to knock down about 10 or 11 dB there. One thing to note is that the expander, the attack is set to fast. You got to do that or it won't open quickly enough to catch the transient of the kick drum. The other thing I have here is a high pass filter, a little bit above 20 hertz, 25 hertz. And then over here on the Solomon, I've got the same filter. Very important that when you have phase related microphones, if you want to maintain that low end phase relationship, that the filter be set the same. So I'm doing that here. I'm also pulling out around 1.3K, a fair bit. That Solomon has a little bit of a honk to it, so I wanted to get rid of that. And then slow attack, fast release compression to get that low end to be kind of punchy. So let me start by turning them off, and we will listen to them both with and without. So let's check that out. So not a huge transformation there, and that's a testament to the quality of that microphone. The kick drum is pretty much sounding like I want right off the bat. So let's move on to the snare drum. And for the snare drum, I want to address the top mic and the bottom mic separately because there's quite a difference in the treatment. Okay, so let's start with the snare top. And I'm doing slow attack, fast release compression to bring out the snap and punch of the drum. No expansion here. I didn't get a lot of bleed. I don't need to mess with that. On the EQ front, I am pushing a little bit of 220-ish. That's pretty much where the meat of most snare drums are. A fairly decent cut at around 700 to get rid of some honk, and then a peaking type filter here. That's what the bell button is for. That at 8K to add some snap. My high pass filter, more up towards 70, pretty expected for a snare drum. And then after that, I've got the transient designer with the attack is set flat and the sustain is extended. I want to lengthen this snare drum. So let me start by turning them off and let's listen to this snare drum raw and then as I add each plugin. So that's quite a transformation. The SSL is doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but that transient designer adding the tail onto it is doing exactly what I want. Okay, so let's switch over to the snare bottom because you might have noticed there wasn't a lot of snares happening there. So let's take a look at the snare bottom and its processing chain. I'm using the same two plugins and there are some similarities, but there's also some key differences. On the SSL-E channel, the first thing I want you to notice is that I am using fast attack compression. The snare bottom mic, I don't want any punch or transient out of it. I just want the splat and the snariness. So you'll hear that getting rid of that for me. And high pass filter matches the snare top for the same reason I mentioned with the kick drum. I'm cutting the 700, get rid of a little bit of a honk. No top end needed here. It's already fairly bright. And on the transient designer, I'm lengthening it a little bit, but it doesn't need as much. So let me again turn them off and we'll solo up the snare bottom, and we'll hear it raw and with the plugins. So as you can hear, knocking down the transient of the snare, elongating the rustle of the snares. Let's hear those two together now, and we'll turn them off and then back on. So I'm getting exactly what I want. Snap and attack, but also length and the proper balance of snare top to snare bottom. Okay, so for the hi-hat and the toms, I'm gonna go through these fairly quickly because there's not a lot happening here. So if we take a look at the hi-hat channel, you'll notice that I'm using that same fast attack, fast release compression for the same reasons as the snare bottom. Want to knock down transient and just focus on lengthening the hi-hat. High pass filter, much higher this time, totally expected on a hi-hat mic, and getting rid of some mid-range, 700-ish to clarify that. So that's the hi-hat mic, not a lot to say there. And the three toms, pretty similar treatment on each of these three toms. So let me walk you through it quickly. Slow attack, fast release, 2-to-1 ratio compression. That's going to give each tom hit just a little bit more punch and accentuate that transient. I also have gating happening here on the toms, and it's only about 8 dB. Remember, when you gate a drum, you do not have to gate it 40 dB or 80 dB. Knocking it down 8 to 10 dB will go a long way. On the EQ front, peaking type filter at 8K to add some stick, and then again, some mid-range cut, this time pretty narrow to kind of deepen the drum, and a little bit of a push on the low end, and of course a high pass filter. So all three of the toms have that similar treatment. They already sound good and they don't need a lot. So let me let you listen to that. Okay, so let's move on to the overheads because this is where some cool stuff is happening. Let me start off by bringing up the E channel here, and we're doing fast attack, fast release compression for the same reasons as before. I want to knock down that transient and the snare and mostly get sort of a fullness of the kit from this. High pass is only at 25 Hertz. I want some low end to come through here. Sometimes that'll be higher when I'm mixing drums, but not this time. And really all I needed to do was pull out some broadband mid-range here around 700 or 800. So not a lot happening there. After that, we have A-type, which is set to an amount of about 30% and a 50-50 ratio using the default excite mode. This is just gonna bring out all of the goodness that's inherent in those microphones. And then I felt like after that, I felt like it still needed a little bit of a mid-range cut. So I brought the MEQ, which has big, broad strokes, and it's pulling out a little bit more 700 after the A-type. And then I'm ending it up with the UA 176. It has mild tube coloration, unlike its sister brother, the 175, but it has a very fast attack, and that's further gonna just sort of knock down transients and smooth out my overhead. So let me solo them for you. Let me turn all of these off, and then let's listen, and I'll bring each one into the signal chain at a time. So those overheads have lots of clarity, lots of focus now, and they're a featured part of this drum sound. Okay, so let's move on to the room mics. And here I am just using 2 instances of A-type. So let me bring them up onto the screen. On the left-hand side, you have the first instance, which is in the default excite mode with an amount at around 30%. And again, this is just sort of extracting the goodness out of the natural sound of these microphones, just like it was on the overheads. And then on the right-hand side, I'm using crush mode with A-type. This is my new go-to for parallel compression. It is awesome. Let's do the same thing. Turn them both off and solo it up and bring them on one at a time. So huge transformation on those room mics. I love it. It's amazing what those 2 instances did. Okay, so let's move on to the drum subgroup. And I have the API summing on this drum subgroup, and I've got the headroom screw turned up, pushing into the model for maximum coloration. Even with that, it's fairly subtle. And then in the inserts, I have the Chandler Curve Bender, one of my favorite bus EQs. And I'm not asking much of it here. I'm doing a 20 hertz high pass and an 18K low pass just to kind of bracket my drums a little bit. And then I am doing another 2 dB cut at 800. And after that, we have the distressor doing some 50-50 parallel compression, adding a little bit of oomph to my drums. And then lastly, we have the UA Precision Maximizer, which is just kind of the final glue. So let me turn everything off, solo up the drums, and bring each one online one at a time. So not a huge transformation, but it is just that final little polish on my drums. So there you have it. That's the final drum sound. Let's take one more listen to just the drums without any processing and then with their processing. And now one final listen in context. So I hope this video has helped you get better at mixing drums and given you some ideas to try on your next mix. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell button so you're notified of all new UA content. And let me know what you want me to cover in a future video. I could be covering your topic in the next one. I'll see you next time.